There is something almost no one tells a woman when God begins changing her life. The first sign isn't that everything starts coming together. It's that everything you once depended on begins quietly falling apart. Most Christians have been taught that if God is with you, life should become clearer, easier, more stable. But Scripture tells a completely different story. Again and again, before God entrusted a woman with his greatest purposes, he first allowed the version of her that could never carry that calling to be broken. If your life feels confusing right now, if the woman you used to be no longer fits, but the woman you're becoming hasn't fully appeared yet, you may not be losing yourself at all. In this video, you'll discover the hidden pattern that connects Sarah, Hagar, Ruth, Hannah, and Esther, a pattern most people read past without ever noticing. And once you see it, you'll never look at your own season the same way again. Because what if the breaking you're fighting is actually the strongest evidence that God is rebuilding you? Let's begin with the first woman who reveals this pattern, because if you've ever wondered why God allows long seasons of waiting before fulfilling his promises, Sarah's story holds the answer. Consider Sarah first, because her story begins with a promise she waited decades to see answered. She was told she would become the mother of a nation, and then she watched year after year pass with nothing to show for it. No child, no evidence, nothing but an aging body and a promise that seemed to be quietly expiring. By the time we meet her waiting in Genesis, she has stopped trusting the promise outright. When she overhears it repeated, she laughs, not out of faith but out of exhaustion. That laughter is important. It tells you that the breaking wasn't gentle. It wasn't a peaceful season of patient trust. It was closer to disbelief, to a woman who had quietly given up on the version of her life she once expected. And yet, Genesis 21:1 records something almost startling in its plainness. The Lord was gracious to Sarah as he had promised, and she conceived and bore a son in her old age, at the very time God had spoken. Notice what that verse doesn't say. It doesn't say the promise arrived once Sarah figured out how to believe harder. It says it arrived at the time God had spoken, regardless of the doubt she was carrying right up until it happened. Her waiting wasn't a test she had to pass perfectly. It was simply the space the promise needed in order to fully form. But don't miss what happens right alongside Sarah's story, because there's a second woman whose breaking looks nothing like waiting. It looks like being discarded entirely. Hagar's season doesn't begin with a promise. It begins with rejection. Used, then sent away into the wilderness with nothing, she ends up alone by a spring, expecting to die there with no one watching and no one coming. And this is where something shifts that almost no one talks about enough. God meets her there, in the wilderness, in the exact moment she has been reduced to nothing by everyone else's decisions. And Genesis 16:13 tells us what she calls him afterward. She gave this name to the Lord who spoke to her. You are the God who sees me. Not the God who rescues her from a distance, the God who sees her in the specific place where she had become invisible to everyone else. That distinction matters more than it might seem. Hagar's breaking wasn't about her own failure. It was about the world discarding her, and it was in that exact discarded state, not after she recovered from it, that she encountered being seen for the first time. If your season right now feels less like waiting and more like being cast aside by circumstances or people who should have valued you, Hagar's story is telling you something specific. Being unseen by everyone around you is not the same thing as being unseen by God. Now think about what breaking actually feels like once it moves out of these ancient stories and into an ordinary week of your own life. It looks like realizing the version of yourself you built your worth around, the composed one, the capable one, the one who always had it together, was never actually load-bearing, and now that it's cracked, you're standing in the wreckage wondering what's actually solid. It looks like relationships you organized your identity around, going quiet, or ending, or simply not becoming what you assumed they would. It looks like old comforts losing their pull, old distractions no longer working the way they used to, as if something in you has stopped being able to pretend certain things were ever enough. That's not you falling apart for no reason. That is often the exact sensation of something being cleared out on purpose. And if you think this pattern only shows up in stories about waiting or rejection, Ruth's story adds something else entirely, because her breaking begins with loss she never chose and ends in a country that was never home. Ruth loses her husband, her father-in-law, her brother-in-law, and any version of security she once had, all before the story even properly begins. She follows her mother-in-law, Naomi, into a foreign land with nothing but her willingness to stay, gleaning leftover grain in someone else's field just to survive. Naomi herself names her own grief plainly in Ruth 1:20, telling the women of Bethlehem not to call her Naomi anymore, but Mara, because the Almighty has made her life very bitter. She doesn't dress the pain up in softer language. She names it exactly as it feels. And yet the very field Ruth gleans in belongs to Boaz, and the very redemption that follows becomes the direct line leading to King David, and ultimately to the lineage Scripture treats as central to everything that comes after. Ruth's breaking wasn't a detour on the way to her purpose, it was the road itself. The famine, the loss, the foreign field she had no right to expect anything from, all of it became the exact setting her restoration required. Here's what's easy to miss in all three of these stories so far. None of these women were shown the ending while they were living the beginning. Sarah didn't know the timing. Hagar didn't know she'd be seen. Ruth didn't know a field of leftover grain would lead anywhere significant at all. And that pattern repeats itself in one more woman whose breaking involved public humiliation, something few of us are ever fully prepared for. Hannah's story is soaked in a very specific kind of pain, the pain of being mocked for what you don't have, while everyone around you moves forward without you. Barren in a culture that measured a woman's worth by children, she is provoked and taunted by her husband's other wife, year after year, until 1 Samuel 1:10 describes her in bitterness of soul, weeping and praying, so overcome that a priest watching from nearby assumes she's drunk. Read that carefully. A woman in the middle of her deepest grief is misread by someone who should have recognized prayer when he saw it. That's often what breaking looks like from the outside. Misunderstood, mistaken for something smaller and less holy than it actually is. But Hannah doesn't stop. She makes a vow in that state, and Scripture records that the Lord remembered her, and in due time she gives birth to Samuel, a child whose name itself means heard by God. And what she does next is the part almost nobody mentions. She doesn't quietly move on from the pain. She sings. 1 Samuel 2:1 records her prayer of praise, beginning with her heart rejoicing in the Lord, because her breaking became the exact material her praise was built from. The mockery she endured wasn't erased from the story. It became the backdrop that made the answered prayer impossible to explain any other way. Here's what almost everyone overlooks in stories like these. None of these women were rebuilt in spite of their breaking. They were rebuilt through it, using the exact material the breaking exposed. And this brings us to a woman whose entire calling only exists because of a breaking she never asked for. Because unlike the others, her story isn't about a private ache. It's about being placed in a position that could cost her everything. Esther's breaking begins with loss too. Orphaned young, raised by a cousin, then taken into a palace and a position she never sought, in a kingdom that had already shown it could discard a queen without warning. When the moment comes that could save or destroy her entire people, she has to choose whether to risk a position she never fully felt safe in to begin with. And it's her cousin Mordecai, who names what's actually happening, in Esther 4:14, asking her, who knows whether she has come to her royal position for such a time as this? Notice what that verse doesn't offer her. It doesn't offer comfort. It offers a reframe. Everything that had happened to Esther up to that point, the loss, the displacement, the position she never asked for, gets recontextualized in a single sentence, not as random misfortune, but as the exact placement her calling required. She could not have arrived at that moment of purpose through a smoother, more comfortable path. The breaking wasn't separate from the calling. It was the route to it. Now here's something worth naming clearly, because it's easy to misapply all of this if you're not careful. Breaking that God allows for the sake of rebuilding you is not the same thing as damage you inflict on yourself through self-punishment, isolation, or treating your own suffering as something you deserve. There's a real difference between a season that hurts because something necessary is being dismantled with purpose, and a season that hurts because you've stopped caring for yourself and started believing the pain itself is the point. The first kind, however painful, is still moving somewhere, toward Isaac, toward being seen, toward a field that leads to redemption, toward a name that means heard, toward such a time as this. The second kind can quietly become its own trap with nothing waiting on the other side of it. If you're unsure which one describes your season, a fair question to sit with is whether there's still some quiet movement underneath the pain, or whether it has gone still, going nowhere, feeding only on itself. There's also something so many women carry silently, and it deserves to be named tenderly: breaking while still performing composure for everyone watching. Showing up steady at work, warm at family gatherings, capable in every conversation, while the actual unraveling happens somewhere underneath, completely invisible to the people standing closest to you. That composure isn't dishonest. Sometimes it's simply what functioning requires while something larger is being reshaped out of view. Sarah likely kept managing a household while she carried decades of unanswered longing. Hannah likely still served her family while grief sat quietly underneath everything she did. The performance isn't the problem. It only becomes worth examining if it turns into a way of avoiding the breaking altogether, instead of a container that holds you steady while it happens. Think about what may have already been broken in you, even if nothing has visibly replaced it yet. Maybe it's the belief that your worth depended on what you could produce or provide. Maybe it's an identity that leaned entirely on someone else's approval to feel stable. Maybe it's simply the assumption that being a woman of faith meant nothing this disorienting was supposed to happen to you. None of that looks like construction yet. It looks like empty space where something used to stand. But empty space, uncomfortable as it is often the exact conditions something new requires before it has anywhere to be placed at all. It also helps to understand what this process is doing structurally, not just what it feels like emotionally. A woman can't be rebuilt on an identity that was already cracked underneath, even if the surface still looked composed. Sometimes the only way to become the woman you were actually meant to be is to have what was never truly solid removed first, even if removing it means everything looks worse before it looks anything like whole. What's happening in you right now might not be undoing something that was working. It might be exposing something that was never actually holding you up, no matter how convincing it looked from the outside. And here's something gentle worth sitting with about how uneven this tends to feel while it's still happening. None of these women experienced a clean, single moment of breaking, followed immediately by restoration. Sarah waited decades. Hannah returned to the same painful ritual year after year before anything changed. Ruth spent seasons gleaning in a field with no promise attached to it yet. There were long stretches where nothing visibly moved, where the ache simply continued without explanation offered in the moment. That unevenness isn't proof that the process has failed you. It's usually just proof that you're still somewhere in the middle of it. So ask yourself gently, is there something in you right now that finally feels light enough to fall away? An old version of your worth, an old image of who you were supposed to be by now, a foundation you've quietly suspected for a while was never actually load-bearing. That falling away might not be the loss it feels like today. It might be the exact clearing this season of your life requires before the woman you were meant to be has anywhere left to stand. If this spoke to where you are right now, stay close. There's more waiting for you here. Subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Because what's being broken in you isn't the end of your story. It's the ground being cleared for who he's already rebuilding you to become.